firearms, looking at the main character with a creepy look. The guy jumps up from the hasty shots fired in his direction and runs screaming behind the column. Sitting behind it and hiding from the bullets, the guy asks himself what kind of gnomes these are, and they are shooting left and right. Looking at the image of the frightening men reloading their machine guns, he says that they are also cute to him. Fire Fist, looking at the column among his henchmen, behind which the main character is sitting, says that he got out of it. Holding a cigarette in his mouth with his hands, the man says that it looks like he outdid those they left to watch him. Raising his head up, the leader blows smoke from his cigarette upward. Nate pays attention to the leader's words that they will now cleanse this place. The guy hears, sitting behind the column, how the Fire Fist tells him that they do not care about him, and they only hate Hephaestus, and it would be a shame to die like this, so they will give him a choice. Holding a cigarette to his mouth, the man says that either he helps them rob the forge and become their accomplice, or leaves, keeping his mouth shut. The guy's face remained in shock. Keeping his hand on the ground, he listens to what the leader tells him to think carefully, and he will not make the wrong choice for some pennies. Imagining the images of the gods Hephaestus and Thor, who say that here he is and the god of the mountain, in words simple, and that they were wrong about him, thinking that if he runs away, then this will simply be the end of his reputation. Gritting his teeth and letting them out from excitement, the guy thinks that at this rate, he may not be able to work part-time anymore, and he won't go like this. He went through so much to get these abilities. Imagining how Hephaestus will wrap him in ropes and turn him into a weapon, Nate thinks that at first Hephaestus will kill him when he sees the looted forge. Looking at the dwarven bandits with ingots, the guy continues to think that there are two chairs in front of him, either beat them or be killed by Hephaestus. Crying, Nate says that he thought the work would be easy, and how did it turn out that way? The leader, with a cigarette in his hand, looks ahead. He sees the hero coming out from behind the column with his hands up, telling him that it was a wise decision. The hero's face becomes more irritated after the leader again called him a low-level god. The leader, holding a cigarette in his mouth, listens to the guy's question about whether he and Hephaestus were partners. Looking at them with anger, Nate asks what the reason is, and if Hephaestus finds out, he won't leave it to them like that, because he is one of the 12 gods of Olympus, the great master Hephaestus, and at least they know what will happen if they anger him. The bald dwarves look at the guy with uncertainty, listening to what he says, that he will send them alive to be melted down, and send the ashes to hell, straight to Cerberus. Opening his mouth wide and pointing his index finger at them, the guy shouts at them, calling them idiots, adding that even heavenly punishment doesn't scare them. Suddenly, a bullet flies between the hero's head and finger behind him in the wall, forcing the guy to shut up. A blonde gnome with a gun and a menacing look tells Nate in another language to shut up, asking who he is baring his teeth at, and there is no mercy for him. The protagonist, holding his wounded cheek, looks at the gnome with fear. The leader looks at the blonde gnome shooting at the protagonist's place, telling him that he will now beat all the evil out of him, stopping his comrade. Enraged, Fire Fist the dwarf walks up to the guy, saying he has no words and he won't let it go, asking the guy what he's saying, that Master Hephaestus is great. The guy sits on the floor, his mouth hanging open in fear, listening to the leader tell him that he knows nothing. Holding a hot cigarette in his teeth, the man says that he'll clear something up for him before he makes mincemeat out of him. The protagonist looks at the leader in shock, listening to him say that Hephaestus is neither great nor a master, but just a piece of trash. The guy's eyes widen even more, and he asks again that Hephaestus is trash. Looking at the leader, Nate asks again what he's saying, that he's trash, to which the interlocutor confirms, saying that although it would be more accurate to call him a thief. Remembering that story, Fire Fist begins to tell that one day, he came to them on the mountain where they lived and said something. Hephaestus tells the bearded man standing with a sword that he has a beautiful sword. The man smiles and gives a thumbs up, asking the dwarf if they want to work with him, and he provides everything they need, to which the leader of the dwarves continues to tell that after they followed this monster here, they became real slaves. The protagonist, with his eyes wide open, looks at the dwarf, asking him again what he wants to say, that Hephaestus made slaves out of them. Sitting at the table with his legs up in the middle of his comrades, the leader says that he will not pay them a penny, but he promised a 5-day week with a 6-hour workday, and free time to boot, and strewn with sweet promises of a beautiful life. They did not even notice the spit in their hot souls, causing the hero to ask what. Spreading his arms out in rage, imagining money and wine in a glass in the background, the fiery fist screams that if it weren't for all the wasted years and wealth and words, everything would belong to them, the dwarves, and this monster Hephaestus set it all up, asking that if he's not a thief, then who is? Nate looks at the dwarf in shock. Combing his hair back with his hands, the leader says that when it finally dawned on him, there was no dwarf left in this place who had the spirit of the master. Standing with his gang with an enemy look, he says that all they have left is desperate revenge. The guy, hiding his words, says with a smile that he understands what they mean, and they are right, and indeed Hephaestus is real trash. The leader with a cigarette in his teeth, with his eyes wide open, looks at the guy, asking the word what, to which he with a sly look tells him that God is an envious trash, wanting to destroy those who are better than him. The main gnome's gaze became clouded. He, with wild eyes, raising his hand, asks the guy that this is all he can say. Stopping the gnome standing in front of him with a hand with weapons, the guy says the word stop. He looks at them, asking them to listen to him, asking if they know how this will look from the outside. listening to the words of the main character that if they run away like this, then for people they will become thieves, and will the gnomes, great craftsmen and proud warriors, be able to come to terms with the fact that their reputation is tarnished? The leader's eyes opened from sensations. The one fist, holding a cigarette in his teeth, opened his eyes, thinking about the phrase that they are great Mulians and proud warriors. Showing the dwarves both hands up, the guy says that they have another option to take revenge on Hephaestus, telling them that it just so happens that he himself is a warrior, and the weapon in his hands was made by Hephaestus. The dwarves listen to the guy as he says that since they called themselves warriors and craftsmen, it is better to leave these games and instead fight with a real weapon that they created. Smiling at the dwarves, Nate says that they need to defeat a warrior who fights with Hephaestus's weapon, asking that wouldn't that be the perfect revenge, and if it isn't, then they should just admit that Hephaestus is better than them and run. Cursing and clenching his teeth, the blonde dwarf asks Nate how he dares to say anything when he himself is already with one foot in the grave. Pointing a gun at the guy, who raised his hands up in fear, he says that he is not going to listen to this anymore. With tears streaming down his face and his hands in front of him, the boy thinks that this is not what he expected. The blonde dwarf, reloading his weapon in his hands, looks at the fierce boss, who asks the hero again about escaping, and for him, the fire fist, to run. Holding a cigarette in his hands with an angry grimace, standing with his comrades, the man tells him that he has the gift of the tongue, again calling him a low-level god, to which the boy began to cry even more, thinking that he was caught. The head of the dwarves turns his back to everyone, saying the word okay and adding that he will fight him, but he is prepared to bear the responsibility for calling himself a warrior. Taking a stick in his hand, the fire fist continues to say that if he cannot hold out until they prove that their weapon is superior to his, then something will happen. Nate opened his eyes with his mouth, listening to the proposal from him. For what he suggested the gnomes to escape, he will do one thing. The leader of the bandits takes a huge sledgehammer on his back, sitting on the floor on his knee with a cigarette in his teeth, telling the guy that he will beat him until his hands are ground to dust. The man's foot steps on the floor, smashing it into pieces. He jumps on the guy with all his might, swinging a sledgehammer at him. Opening his eyes to madness, his fist screams at him to get it, since he is so brave. The main character clenched his teeth from his future. At that moment, an explosion occurs in the previous place of Nate's position, but he successfully dodges, flying in the other direction. Flying back, the guy with a surprised face says that this is Shu. His eyes move to the side. He sees how the column, standing in front of it, begins to collapse in pieces from the gnome's blow to the floor. It breaks and flies to the side of the protagonist. Walking across the floor and throwing a cigarette down, the dwarf asks him if he is surprised, and what? He thought that without guns they are too tough for him. Standing in a beautiful pose with a huge hammer on his shoulder, the man calls out to Nate, calling him a low-level god. The dwarf's gaze changes from the question that he thinks he can win, making his aura more insane, and pulling out the mace of Hercules, Nate warns him to watch out, lest he surprise them. He abruptly jumps from his place, swinging the mace at the dwarf in the process. The hero runs the weapon across his fist's chest, causing him to cough in pain. Clutching the handle of the hammer tighter in his hands, he hits the boy with it with all his might, breaking the floor, screaming the word "what else?" Finding himself behind the man, Nate asks him where he is looking, adding that it was just his illusion. The man hits the boy with his hammer again. He again dodges through the bottom, remaining below him. Looking at the guy, the dwarf notes that he is good, to which, opening his eyes, Nate tells him that he is surprised too early. Running a mace over him, he in response receives a boot to the shoulder from a fiery fist. The main dwarf's comrades watch the battle, worried about the boss and shocked by the events. The main character looks at the footprint on his shoulder with a displeased face. With a villainous smile, the man tells him that he told him that the guy would not live to see anything. The hero jumps back from the proximity to the dwarf. Putting the weapon forward, he says with a smile that this is the first time he got hit with a foot, and it was painful, noting to the dwarf that he is not bad either. Standing on the handle of the hammer, the fire fist, with a torn shirt, tells him that he is smooth, and his stance immediately seems strange. The guy with an incomprehensible face looks at the dwarf, who says that it is even good that he immediately demonstrated his limit, and it was a trifle, to which Nate asks him that he understood it only from his stance. Looking at the guy, the fist says that even an idiot understands this, adding that he has never seen a person who would hold a blunt weapon like him. Looking at the huge red aura with his monsters of the guy, the fire fist tells him that these precise blows even gave him goosebumps. Taking off his shirt, the boss says that his heart has not beaten like this for a long time, and here one of two things, that either he is his equal, or even higher. The dwarf's comrades were shocked, asking again that the guy is equal to the boss. Nate opens his eyes from hearing the dwarf sincerely apologize for calling him a low-level god and for underestimating him. Looking at the torn shirt in the air, the fist says that to prove his sincerity, this time he will show respect for his strength. Creating an animalistic and wild atmosphere around himself, holding a hammer in his hands, Fire Fist says that he will fight with all his might, to which the guy, holding a mace in his hand and extending his other hand to the dwarf, says that he asks him. The dwarf begins to fly towards the guy at full speed, swinging his hammer. Both characters with furious faces swing their weapons at each other. Suddenly, from their joint collision, a bright splash of light from the weapons occurred. Intercepting his mace, the guy jumps over the dwarf's back. Fire Fist turns around and catches a blow to the chest from Nate's weapon. Fist also swings his mace at the guy. Their weapons are connected together, and their eyes are filled with the energy of the fight, looking into each other's souls with excitement. The dwarf's comrades are watching the battle, supporting the boss in every way. The blonde dwarf, standing with another dwarf, says that his heart is pounding like crazy, and it seems to remind them of something. They watch their lively fight with sparks. Fist's eyes begin to fill with tears, and he realizes that the fight reminds him of the sounds of a forge. The other dwarf also glazes his eyes, noticing the vibrating sound. The blonde dwarf talks about the roar of metal, filling his eyes with tears. All the dwarves imagine how a hammer hits iron, and they think that these are such familiar sounds of a forge. Looking at Nate's open mouth, the dwarves notice that his ardor seems to knock on their souls. Gritting his teeth in a smile, the dwarf tells him that he has the spirit of a blacksmith. Remembering the words of the protagonist about the envious trash who wants to destroy those who are better than him, the Fiery Fist tells himself that he has nothing to say in response to him, because it is easier to blame the capable than to admit his own inability, remembering the day when they received Hephaestus' offer. Hephaestus opens the doors for the three dwarves, telling them that they will work here. Remembering how the dwarf stood in front of the most beautiful blade, he says that they, like frogs who first got out of the well, faced a storm of emotions and inflated dreams. Remembering how he polished those same blades with tears in his eyes, he says that dreams constantly reminded them that they were not good enough. Noting that it was a pathetic story and everything that happened after they came out of the well was a waste of time, remembering all the moments with his bandit group of gnomes. Nate delivers the final blow to the Fire Fist, from which it drops its hammer to the ground. Letting tears from his eyes, the gnome tells himself that this is truly a complete defeat. The guy swings even harder at the body of the fist, hitting it hard. He hits the gnome with all his strength, erupting light from the blow. Suddenly, Hercules' weapon is stopped with one palm by a large man. Hephaestus stands between the protagonist and the gnome, holding Nate's weapon and saying that this is enough. The men looked at the god with fear, hearing what he was saying about how as soon as he stepped away, real chaos ensued here, and at first he even thought that he had gone to the wrong place. Looking at the men with a frightening gaze, Hephaestus seriously says that he would very much like to know what happened here and in detail. Looking at the broken columns and the broken floor, Hephaestus says that, of course, he suspected that there would be a fight, but this is just some kind of apocalypse. Holding his face with his hand and looking away, he says that everything is clear with this, but there is another question. Looking at the iron ingots, he asks if anyone will explain this to him. Hephaestus, raging at the little bearded gnome with his anger, asks him what he will explain to him what happened here. The Fiery Fist falls to the ground. Standing on one knee in front of the god, he says that this is all his and his people have nothing to do with it. The dwarf's comrades behind him start to look surprised, calling out to him. Looking at the fist seriously, Jeff asks what he's saying, that it was all him, and if he can find out the reason. Remembering the moments with his comrades, the Fire Fist thinks that now he understands that he can be punished for the wrong decision, but his guys are not, because their only mistake was that they trusted such a brainless commander like him. Slightly opening his mouth, the dwarf hesitantly says that the reason is that he decided to rob the forge. Suddenly, interrupting the man, Nate puts his hand on his shoulder, saying that he will tell about it. Passing the dwarf on his knee to Hephaestus, Nate casually says that it was he who made him, asking for forgiveness for the mess. The leader looks at the guy in shock, and he told the god that the dwarf acted on his orders. Jeff looks at the guy, asking why on his orders, and after all, he trusted him to guard the forge. Does he want to explain? Awkwardly laughing, the guy tries to explain something. Holding a beautiful necklace in his hand in front of the god, he says that first the god should look at this, to which Jeff opens his eyes in shock. Putting the necklace in the god's large hand, he says that he found it, to which Nate adds that Jeff said that it was missing. The leader of the gnomes imagines it in front of two gnomes, saying in his head that this is it, the necklace that he gave to those who were watching him. Being in more and more tension with wild eyes, the man thinks that if he says that he found it with them, it will not end with just one fist. The gnome hears the god's question about where he found it, thinking that this is the end. Holding his head with his hand and smiling, Nate says that it wasn't him who found it, but the Fiery Fist, and there was enough time, so he told him to turn the entire warehouse upside down. All the dwarves open their eyes in shock, listening to what Nate says about the dwarf being short, so after he searched every corner, the necklace was found. Looking at the dwarf on one knee, Hephaestus asks him if it's true. Looking down, the dwarf tries to say something. Squinting his eyes, Jeff began to think. The protagonist's gaze became just as tense. Laughing and opening his mouth wide, the god says, "What difference does it make? After all, he did a great job of keeping an eye on the forge and even found the necklace." Exhaling air, the protagonist, tiredly, says that he got away with it. Taking the guy by the shoulder, Jeff tells him with a smile that he really is a nice guy. Smiling even more, the god says that he once again understood why Thor liked him. Awkwardly covering his eyes from a smile, the guy thanks him. Suddenly, the god takes the hammer in his hands, saying something about it, to which the dwarf fidgeted. Looking at the dwarf with a smile, Hephaestus says that he was worried that they were losing motivation and shirking their work. Holding a huge, beautiful hammer in his hands, he says that his doubts were in vain, because he heard from Olympus how Hercules' club grappled with the hammer, but there is not a scratch on it. Holding the hammer, the god tries to say something. The dwarf looks with all his attention at the man standing in front of him. Extending the handle of the hammer to the sitting dwarf, Hephaestus says that he has become better than he was before. The dwarf lets tears from his eyes from the god's words that he always looks forward to their work. Telling the crying dwarves to continue in the same spirit, they say well. Nate looks up at the god calling him. Holding the portal with his hand, Hephaestus tells him with a smile that it's good that he trusted him with this job, and not only did he cope with the main tasks, but he also found a necklace. He takes a box out of the portal, giving it to the hero. Standing with his hand on the guy's shoulder in front of the box, Hephaestus says with a smile that here is a small reward for exceeding his expectations. Wiping his drool with his hand with an enthusiastic face, Nate asks himself in shock in his head that this is a special prize, like completing an SS rank quest, and he thought that he would receive a club as a reward. But hear this. Starting to open the box with his hands, the guy says that it would be impolite to refuse. Opening the lid with a satisfied face, the guy thanks the god. Suddenly, his face changes, seeing the contents of the box. He sees a small monster in the box, asking what is it, a monster. Coming closer to the guy, Hephaestus points at him, telling him to take a closer look. He looks at the beautiful fox, saying that he is cute, but a monster as a pet is strange. Taking the animal in his arms, the god with a sly face asks Nate that he does not need her. Suddenly, Hephaestus begins to whisper something in the fox's ear. In a moment, she is illuminated by magic, turning into a beautiful sword. God, holding the fox blade in his hand, sighing says that it is sad that he does not need her, causing shock to the guy standing in the background. Looking at the sword with shock, he asks that she can turn into him. Looking at the guy with an even bigger sly smile, the god says that he is not a simple sword either. Introducing different variations of weapons, Hephaestus talks about a sword, a scythe, a spear, it does not matter. This fox can become any weapon in the world if it is about her size. The fox transforms back into a betch animal, landing on Hephaestus' hand, to which he says that in other words, she is a real treasure. Looking at the hero with disgust, he says that it is a pity that he refuses her. Turning his back to the hero, the god says that nothing can be done, and then he will give her to the dwarves. Folding his hands in a lock and smiling, looking at Hephaestus next to him, Nate asks him how he can refuse a gift from Hephaestus himself, to which the god asks that he said that he does not like her, and he has already changed his mind. Holding his finger up and looking away, Nate says that how is this possible, and he only showed up out of politeness. Stroking the cute fox in the god's arms, the guy says that he will take good care of her. Holding the animal in his hands, he tells her with a blush on his face how beautiful she is. Looking directly at her in his hands, Nate notices that she is so white and fluffy, and from that moment on, her name is Snow White. The fox begins to lick the protagonist's cheek, to which he asks her with a smile if she likes her name. The god's hand reaches for the fox. He, casting a spell, tells the guy that he entrusts him with the moon fox, the treasure of Selene, the goddess of the moon. Looking at the fox, the guy asks with confusion what all this is. Hephaestus gives the guy a thumbs up, smiling, telling him that he now has a child on his neck, and he will also give him all sorts of things from the warehouse. Opening a portal and looking at the guy with a smile, the god says that he still has some things to do, so they will part here. Thanking with a smile, with the fox on his shoulder and a bag on his back, Nate thanks him for his concern, and the man wishes the guy a safe journey. The gnome's leg steps behind the guy, to which the fist says that thank God that Nate is still here. Seriously looking into the void, the naked gnome asks why he lied to help them. After all, they were going to remove him if he decided to interfere, adding that he was literally trash to them, so why did it turn out this way? Slightly opening his mouth, the protagonist wants to tell them that there is something. Remembering all his moments of failure, he says that this is familiar to him, and they reminded him of him from the past. Opening his eyes, the bearded man asks in shock that this is familiar to him, and that's all, to which Nate says that if he suddenly needs something, he will help, and will not ask for anything, let the gnomes not worry. The guy's hair flutters in the wind from the portal, and he smiles at the gnome, asking him that shouldn't they all help each other. Focusing his gaze even more, the guy wants to add something. Looking at Hephaestus, the guy says that the master knew everything from the very beginning, and simply did not interfere. Walking into the portal and closing it in front of the dwarf, the protagonist says goodbye to the dwarf. Catching the guy's scent, the fiery fist calls out Nate's name. Bowing in front of the portal, he says that he expresses gratitude to him from their entire tribe, thinking that although they cannot wash away this shame, the fist hopes that someday they will be able to do this by returning the debt to him. Smiling, looking forward, the dwarf again thanks the guy with all his heart in his thoughts. Hephaestus looks away with a satisfied smile, when suddenly he begins to say that they have a sleepless night ahead of them, and everyone needs to work and raise the temperature. The bright lights of the city illuminate the dark night sky with stars. Lowering the bag to the ground, the hero holds it with his hand, trying to say something. He looks at a tall dark building with the lights on in the windows. Looking at the sign of the building that says it's a hunting shop, The guy says he'll go and get the money. The man in the suit with a glass of wine, it's Chase. He's 37 years old. He's been working in this field since he was young as a manager for hunters. Last week he was promoted to general manager at the largest hunting agency in the country. He took a sip of wine from his glass. He noticed that there was something wrong with his tie. Since he got the best job in Korea, he should leave the past and start living as an elegant man like other aristocrats. He straightened his tie, said it was terrible, he can't allow such a mistake in the future. He closed his eyes, thinking that it is the position that makes a man. In this position he should be stylish. His thoughts were interrupted. He opened his eyes, twitched the corner of his mouth. In this holy place, what did he do? Nate with a bag on his back. He has a lot of things to sell. The man was indignant. How dare this worthless person come? He paid attention to the pet, thought, even someone like him, a hunter, his pet is tiny. He looked at the guy's clothes. He has no armor or even a weapon. He twisted his mouth. He had met people like him before. This happens quite often. Fools who imagine themselves hunters pick up trash in abandoned dungeons. Hand in his pants pocket, looked at the guy, waved his hand, told him to follow him. They passed by a glass display case. Go to the goods appraisal department. Chase pointed to an elderly man behind the counter. He can give his finds to him. The items are in the bag. Now he will check and evaluate what he brought. He looked at the weapon with surprise, asked where he got it. Nate with an indifferent look answered that an acquaintance drove up a few things. The guy plugged his ears with his fingers. Chase was furious, shouted that he was right. Why did he come to them with such junk? He put his hands on the counter, demanded an answer from the appraiser. He just dragged in some strange junk. The old man frowned, said that he had been working here for 40 years, but he was the first person to call such things gizmos. All these items were at least of the highest quality, not lower than rank 4. The items on the table were shining. His eyebrows were raised, his lips were stretched forward. Chase thought, this is impossible. How could a lone wolf get such valuables? So he is a big shot. Where did he come from? He glanced sideways at the hero. He had heard that there are modest rich people, but still. He smiled broadly, bowed, invited him to the VIP room. A sign in front of the entrance. First they will talk about the cost. The heroes are sitting around the table. The appraiser spread his hands. If the guy sells all this, he will get about 3 billion won. Nate shrugged, laughed, that's all. Made a questioning face, what? Bit his fist, thought with horror, so the weapon that Hephaestus called junk is worth 3 billion. Covered his mouth with his hands, eyes wide open. The appraiser said that this is only a preliminary price. Depending on the number of buyers, it can be doubled. A shadow fell on his eyes. Chase thought that right before his eyes was a weapon of the highest quality, which would be bought at any price. Almost no one supplies it. Clenched his fist. He simply had to become its dealer. Bowed his head to the side. With an ingratiating smile began to say that if his dear client had plans to sell. Nate stopped him. The man froze, asked what? There was an ominous aura around the guy, red eyes. He said that he would sell everything. Chase, against the background of the forest with tears in his eyes, thought, this is an angel sent from heaven. With him he can climb even higher on the career ladder. The image turned black and white. The guy crushed his dreams by saying he wasn't going to sell them here. He'd never seen a manager who kept his hand in his pocket in front of a guest. Chase, the former general manager of the hunting department, was the first person to be fired after a week. The bank employees bowed. The guy took the document with trembling hands. This wasn't a dream. He cried with happiness. He had money in his bank account and so many zeros. He adjusted his hood, thought, these guys were obviously surprised by his appearance, but not as much as that guy from the hunting department. Maybe he was too dirty. Well, he had to drive around the area all day. He noticed the store window. His lips formed a smile. He had a lot of money. He could please himself with a gift for a good job. Tomorrow he, like a good son, would visit his mother. The door toward 331. Information on the stand. The woman covered her mouth with her hand, surprised. So much time had passed since their last meeting. There are many gifts in front of her, she exclaimed. Where did all this come from? A roommate with a remote control in her hand said that she should at least watch TV sometimes. Women are looking at the screen. She said that people are going crazy over it. The news reported that Nate received the highest level of skill in the country. Hand on the back of his head. The guy was embarrassed. The woman said that, according to reporters, he was able to cope thanks to talent and asked him for an autograph. The mother opened her mouth in surprise. Her son has talent. Scratching his temple, Nate said that he recently received it, thought, although that's not all. Smiled. Everything happened so unexpectedly that he did not really understand. Leaned towards his mother. She lowered her head, leaning her hands on the table. She cries, covering her mouth with her hand, said that she is very proud of him. Nate reached out to her, asked why she was crying. She replied that it was wonderful. The guy's worried look, she was always worried. The woman cries, covering her face with her hands because he had no talent. The screen on the wall, the host said that they have fresh news about the dungeon. Reporters are holding microphones to the guild leader. Everyone is talking about that newbie. Who is he? Chuck raised his hand, answered that he can't tell the details, but he is the best of the hunters, strong as a swordsman and incredibly smart. Without him he would definitely not be able to clear the dungeon in time. The guy covered his face with his hand. His mother was surprised. He was talking about him. Hand to chin, Nate thought that this was his chance. Blue screens with notifications. The more popularity he has, the more divine power, which means he will be able to find even more part-time jobs. He has already chosen several good ones. He will have a special reward for the spirit in the Garden of Eden. A golden apple, it will definitely be able to cure his mother of cancer. The woman folded her hands in admiration. The host, hands on the table, there is urgent news. Portal on the highway, recently in the city of Yongin. The gates opened, an order was given for the immediate evacuation of residents. The fox cub on the boy's shoulder bristled. He hid in his jacket. His mother was surprised it wasn't a scarf. Nate brought his hand to the trembling snowball, asked what was wrong. There were black waves of flame around the beast's hand and ear. An interdimensional rift formed in space near the earth. It was reflected in the hero's eyes. He grabbed his head, wondering what it was. He looked to the side. They said that the association was calling the guilds. Open gates on the road. Unlike dungeons, the gates do not let people in, but monsters freely enter the world. Nate thought that the illusion he saw. The hospital building. He shouted to his mother that he needed to go. She asked why he didn't stay longer. The neighbor reminded him that he was busy. Her son was a celebrity. Goblins run out of the gates. The warriors gathered on the street. The commander shouted for them to get ready. The third wave was approaching. Foot and sneaker on the ground, ordered to quickly drag away the wounded. Flock of birds in the sky, trees. Nate looks at the warriors fighting goblins from the cliff, asked, "Is this the gate?" Fox cub on his shoulder, the guy smiled, said, "Well, let's go." Stabs sword into goblin. Pulls out sword, turns head, asks, "Third wave is approaching." Commander points finger at soldiers, shouts for them to rest a bit before new invasion, but reporters are about to arrive, so they shouldn't look too relaxed. Soldier looks back, looks up, silhouette of guy standing on the cliff, asks, "What's that?" Nate looks around, shields his eyes with his hand. Soldier realizes it's human. Commander looks back, warrior runs towards him, grabs him by clothes, shouts angrily, "Who gave him permission to leave post? Didn't he hear what he said about reporters?" The guy pointed up, stuttered, yelled at him to look down. Nate leaned down, looked down, the man asked. The soldier replied he thought it was a local. The commander opened his mouth, eyes wide, asked again, "A local in a combat zone?" The guy replied, "Yes sir, probably." He covered his mouth with his hand, grabbed his face, furious, asked then what he was doing. The reporters look at the commander who ordered the soldier to take out the guy. The man looked back at them. Did civilians get in here? The guy with glasses leaned over to the girl, covered his mouth with his hand, said he thought the squad leader was competent. She replied that apparently he couldn't even control the fence from the local population. The commander in front of the reporters, they laughed. He must have gotten the position through connections. He will have something to tell on the news. He threw his helmet on the ground, leaves, calling them untalented. He looks at the rock where the hero is standing, said that he almost went crazy when his comrades were sent to the dungeon, and he was sent here alone. There is a whirlwind of air around his leg. If he wants a promotion, he needs to sort this out quickly. Activated the air running skill. Pushed off the ground. Jumped up. The shadow fell on the guy's face. Nate looked back. The commander was behind him. He rests one hand on his side, the other on his head. The man was indignant that he has to do it himself. He waved his hand in front of the guy's face and told him to get out right now. Can't he see that this is a closed area? Nate shook his head. The man said that he can shoot a video for YouTube somewhere else. An evil grin. Noticed that he looks scared and can't even think straight at the sight of a third-rank hunter. The guy walked past him. The commander said he understood. He was excited, and if he wanted an autograph or an interview, he could make an exception. The hero asked him not to interfere. That's not why he was there. The man frowned, lowered his head. Nate asked again, interview, autograph. He was famous. He grabbed the guy's hand. Veins on his face, clenched his teeth, asked. He was ignoring him. The pat on his shoulder bared his teeth. Nate looked back, asked what he was doing, wondered how he had even survived the wave. Hand on face, grinning, the commander said, now even the guy on the left looks down on him. The fox is angry. The man noticed that he has a puny beast. He is sure that he is a third-rate hunter who decided to become famous, but he needs to know his place. He swung his fist, said that a good blow would definitely bring him to his senses. The guy dodged the blow, tripped him. The commander falls. He saw an abyss in front of him. Nate caught him by the arm. The man over the edge of the cliff. The hero smiled and asked if everything was okay, but was it normal for a third-rank hunter to hang like that? The commander blushed. He grabbed his arm and was indignant. He was just lucky he even knew who he was. He attacked again. The blow missed. The guy's legs and sneakers behind the commander. Nate raised his hands, asked if he could continue. The reporter pointed to the cliff. They had to film the fight. The commander shouted in rage. That was his goal. Next to her, an employee with a camera. She recognized the hero. Nate is standing at the edge of the cliff. This is the guy who cleared the labyrinth dungeon with the Chuck Guild, a new monstrously powerful hunter. The commander opened his mouth. Could he really be Nate? The guy in profile smiled. They attracted attention. The hero raised his hand, shouted at the reporters to take good shots. There will be cool news soon. He looked back at the commander, asking what they were talking about. He began to make excuses. The man raised his eyebrows. Nate told him to open his eyes wider and see what the left guy is capable of. A foot in a sneaker pushed off the ground. The girl looks up in surprise. The commander in profile told him to stop. A flash of light in front of the hero's face. He falls down. A purple glow around the guy. He pointed his hand forward. touched the portal. The warriors covered themselves with their hands, a purple vortex from the gate. Smoke around, reporters cover their faces with their hands. The girl asked what it was. The commander looks down. This is a new phenomenon that appeared 10 years ago. Unlike the dungeon, only weak monsters appear here, and after some time the gate disappears. Cracks in the asphalt, a purple aura around the portal. Some scientists have an opinion about the danger of the gate. She asked, this man just entered the gate. This opinion is that they go beyond human understanding, because no one can enter there. Multicolored interference, the hero's status was checked. He is a low-level god and can enter the other world. The guy against the backdrop of mountains, this is definitely the gate from Snowball's memories. Planets in the sky in front of the hero, asked if the gate was created by gods, and no one from humans is allowed to enter, then the deity can. The corners of his mouth are down. He thought, why is it not allowed here? But it was possible in the dungeon. God said with a grin about creating a place where people will suffer. The guy remembered that he said that the dungeon was created for testing. Nate decided to look around, but hit the wall, touched it with his hand, removed his hand. Since the divine power is not enough, entry is prohibited. Frustratedly looks at the screen in front of him, kicks the wall, the same notification. Hit the wall with his shoulder, entry is prohibited. Bangs his head, everything remains the same. Many windows with messages. The guy is lying on the ground, raising his hands in a rude gesture, outraged that he can't get out of here. Sitting, crossing his legs, said that he is fine and has no other choice. He got up, there is only one thing left. He looked at Snowball, sitting on his shoulder, asked him to stay close. The hero at the entrance to the cave, in his memories he saw himself entering inside, but he does not want this. In the darkness there are many glowing red eyes. He decided to go look at the face of the owner of the gate. Steam from the mouth. The dungeon, Nate kicked the goblin, outraged why there are so many of them here. Looking away, he thought that he would be able to clear everything if he killed the boss, like in the dungeon, but he does not even have a hint. The monster in front of the guy thought that everything was different here, as if the monsters from the dungeon were programmed like robots. The goblin quickly runs away, and these guys are clearly fighting consciously. He put his hand on the cave wall. The divine power definitely increased. How did he come here? But he could have gotten in another way. A huge goblin with a sword behind the guy. Nate looked to the side, his eyes wide. The monster struck. He managed to jump back. The guy grinned. Really? A red goblin with glowing eyes with a weapon? He found the boss of the gate. The monster turned his head, swung his sword. The guy exclaimed. He appeared. The same scene. The guy opened his mouth, looks at the goblin who raised his hand. He is so slow. Swinging the weapon, the hero dodged. Put his foot on the blade, asked, is this really the boss? He pressed hard on the weapon, part of the blade flies up. He shouted that he will deal with him in a moment. The goblin scratched his temple, looks at the broken sword. Nate threw the sword in his hand, struck a blow at the monster. The boss fell to the ground. The guy frowned, looked at him with a question. The goblin's head was turned to the side. The hero was surprised, that's all. The guy poked a stick into his face, asked, and no notification of victory. Really the finish? He pretends to be a corpse. No one in life will believe that he cleared the gate like that. He took the sword, his eyes flashed angrily. For credibility, he decided to extract the core. The guy shuddered. Blood splashes. If you believe the videos he watched, it is in the very depths of the heart. The cave vault, blood, continues to cut. Splashes fly to the sides. Nate holds the devil's core in his hand, found it. A black clot, wondered why it was black. In the video it usually shines and sparkles like a diamond. He looked at it closely. It seemed as if this thing was moving. The creature in his hand opened its mouth. The guy screamed in fear. He threw it on the ground. He touched it with his sword, thought he had cut something wrong. It was the restless soul of a goblin. He pierced the core, picked it up, apologized to Snowball. In front of him is a screen with a message that the gate core has been received and total destruction will begin. The sun is over the mountain. The section of the road where the gate opened is blocked. A crowd of reporters surrounds a policeman, asking if it is true that a person was able to enter. What is happening here? He told everyone to disperse, no questions. A woman in glasses, the commander is giving an interview behind him. She went to the doctor for the laptop, asked if they shouldn't stop them. The world would go into chaos after such news. That's not all. The man in the background of the portal pursed his lips, frowned. She shouted that a bunch of claims would fly to their academy for spreading false information. The guy adjusted his glasses, asked the chairman standing next to him what his opinion was. He offered to watch. She shouted, from outstanding dungeon explorers, a man in a suit with a cigarette in his mouth, to members of the Hunters Association. An indignant woman, behind her, from the portal, Nate's displeased face. She added that if something else happens. The guy looked at the people around him, as he expected, a bunch of people. Nate gets out of the portal, embarrassed. Everyone is surprised how the man managed to get out. The woman looks at the guy, her mouth open. He just took and walked through the gate as if nothing had to be done. Eyes closed. The guy inhaled air, noticed that he was much better outside. Camera flashes, reporters trying to get to the hero behind the tapes, shouting different questions. Nate waved his finger. He brought his fist to his mouth, said that this is not important, but that from now on humanity. He pointed at the gate, can destroy it. He nodded. People were surprised. How can they be destroyed? If they cannot even enter, then they can be cleared, like a dungeon. The guy took out a sword. The camera is pointed at it. The core in his hand said that he took it from the heart of the boss of the gate. He threw it up. People looked up, looking at the core in the air. The hero said that now he will show something very interesting. He swung the sword, cut it into pieces. Cracks, fragments, a flash of light. The gate behind him collapsed. The guy in the cap, the other in the orange hoodie, opened their mouths in surprise. The hero smiled contentedly. It was great. The woman with glasses holds a shard in her hands. She thought she had seen everything while experimenting with the gate. A vortex in the sky, colorful fragments. She looked back at the guy, asked who he was. His lips formed a smile. He was waiting for this question. The rays of the sun over the cliff, he said his name. The hand on the hilt of the sword, the guy repeated it again. A map of the island with borders and arrows, a mysterious hunter who entered the gate. From the news that captured everyone's attention, the name Nate became famous throughout Korea. Comments on this from users. Blue windows, where it is reported that the divine power is rapidly increasing. The guy has reached the top in the rank of a lower level deity. Nate reaches out his finger to the screen. He thought this was an important notification. The microphone passed through the blue screen. The hero was scared, seeing a reporter in front of him who asked him to ask a question. Journalists are shoving microphones in his face, trying to find out how he can enter the gate, how he got the core to destroy it. The guy screamed that he just received an important notification. A crowd, a car nearby, a girl's legs in high heels coming out of an open door. She is wearing a short pleated skirt. The man said that they just found out. The guard pushed the girl reporter, asked for forgiveness. She noticed a girl with long black hair behind him. The reporter grabbed the guy in glasses by the shoulder, exclaimed, "This man." The man looked at the beauty with admiration. In front of Nate are microphones. He raised his hand, trying to calm everyone down. They turned to him. Chloe with the guards, phone in hand, said that the boss wants to see him. The guy turned his head, froze. She said that from now on. The girl with a serious face, he must go with them. Nate walked into a room with a sofa and a TV, as expected from a top 2 guild in Korea. The building is huge and the rooms are spacious. As he was leaving, the guard told the guy that the guild leader was temporarily unable to see him due to the discovery of an underwater cave near Okinawa. But he would be back soon. He wondered what his business was, calling someone and then going to go to the dungeon. He sat down on the sofa. Did they really have an urgent order to pick him up after the news about the gate on the way to the dungeon? Apparently he said too much to keep him here for so long. Maybe they will try to recruit him. A sad face, but if you think about it, these people really came on their own. The men in suits bowed to Chloe walking on the red carpet. She was able to move up the guild leader list without anyone's help, one of 3 level 7 hunters in all of Korea. The girl with the sad look, in this incredible age, when thousands of hunters appeared, she is known all over the world. Everyone in Korea knows her. He sits, leaning back, thought that otherwise she would not have been able to get him out of this mess. People like her stay away, but they can cut the Red Sea. He leaned over, said that in contrast to everything, this is good, because there was something he wanted to check. A screen appeared in front of the guy. He opened the system. Blue windows with messages that he had unlocked additional abilities. A question whether he wanted to see the available titles. Nate was delighted, asked, titles like Thor the God of Thunder or Ares the God of War. He simply had to choose the coolest one at any cost. He poked his finger at the screen to see the options. The guy was delighted. These are the titles of gods. Glowing screens, among the options the god of fans, fly swatters, or a bottle of water. He raised his hands, extremely indignant. Who even entered such titles? Nate in gloves, swatting flies. He yelled for them to stop making fun of him. He runs his finger across the screen, trying to find something worthwhile. A bead of sweat on his cheek. He smiled. He found something an hour later. A blue screen with options. The guy noticed the God of Swords. He frowned, decided that it suited his talent perfectly. He pressed his finger on the accept button, choosing the title. The guy looks up in surprise at the glowing core. Light on his chest, a swirl of numbers. Wide open eyes glow blue, sparks around his hand. Discharges at his leg. Glow from a closed door. Nate leaned over, putting his hand on his chest. Notifications with congratulations. He became the God of Swords. Unfamiliar gods blessed him. He sank onto the couch, exhaled. It was so hard to find a suitable title. Nate lies on the floor, remembered that he almost died when he received the talent. The guy clenched his teeth, the veins on his face and neck bulged. New messages in the windows. He needs to choose a power. He looks at the many screens in surprise. He raised his head, thinking with excitement. Finally, he will be able to use the power of the gods. A surprised look. On the blue screen is the spirit sword, but here he needs divine power. He decided to calm down. He is not buying something expensive in the divine store. All this will become his with a level up. He touched the screen, thought, not the best starter kit. Finger near the screens, selects the first power. Press the button, choosing intuition. Nate's profile is on the screen. It will be updated. The guy rubbed his cheek on the screen, was glad that now at least he looked like a god's profile. He paid attention to the skills section. You will need to test them. He looked around in fear. There was a knock on the door. Nate turned his head, asked, is it Chuck? The fox jumped onto his shoulder. No, he went into the sunken dungeon. He could hardly return so quickly. No one here would look for him except him. He turned the door handle. The door opened slightly. Behind it stood a girl with long hair. The guy asked who it was. He was amazed. Chloe was standing in front of him, her arms crossed over her chest. She tilted her head to the side, asked if she could come in for a while. There was a drop of sweat on her cheek. Nate asked what brought her. She reached into her pocket, told him to wait a second. She handed him a red card with a tiger. The guild leader asked him to give it to her. The hero took the card. The girl explained that this was an exclusive pass for members of the Sangan Guild. On its territory he could use all the amenities. He looked up, thought, was this part of some plan? The guy smiled at Chloe and thanked her. The girl looked at him coldly and was silent. Nate repeated that he was grateful for the pass. They stood opposite each other, tense silence. White eyes, a frowning face, he thought, so awkward, she was always so silent. Chloe looked down. He thought that there was a strange energy coming from her. Nate smiled shyly, said that then, his pet's eyes sparkled. The fox jumped off his shoulder. The hero is confused. Snowball jumped to the girl. Nate's eyes widened. He waved his arms, asked for forgiveness. He is not usually like this. Chloe strokes the animal, said that everything is wonderful. He is very cute. The guy looks at her, his mouth open. The girl asked if she could give him a treat. He said, of course. She reached into her jacket pocket. She gave the fox a seed. Nate frowned, thinking that he somehow did not care about the hospital staff. What did he like about her so much? He raised an eyebrow. Maybe he prefers pretty girls. And what does she feed Snowball? The girl looked in his direction. He asked if it was a seed. The animal eats a seed, holding it in its paws. She said that these are some kind of food supplements. Nuts are very useful. A contented fox on Nate's shoulder. Chloe, opposite the hero, said that it was nice to meet him. She leaned towards Snowball and said that they would see each other later. The door was closed. He sat down on the couch. He complained that it was incredibly difficult to communicate with her. He looked at Snowball sitting on the couch and asked if he liked her. He lay down in her arms and ate what they gave him without caution. He trusted her so much. He shifted his gaze. Above the guy's head is the scene of Chloe saying goodbye to the fox. He wondered if he had ever told her its name. The girl is walking down the hallway. She smiled slightly. Nate holds his new phone in his hand, searching through it for ways to get rid of the stalkers, and thoughtfully says that he needs to look it up. Thoughtfully kneading his chin, he remembers how Chloe addressed his pet by a name that he had not told her, and, thinking out loud, he asks himself what he should do with Chloe, and notes that she looks normal, and regretfully asks who knew that she would turn out to be a stalker. A system window appears near MC and shows that he has one new notification. The irritated hero, in the background of many notifications, shouts, asking what is going on, and says that he has so many offers. The system window informs that a new part-time job has appeared. The hero, perplexed, still decides to look at what kind of notification he received, asking what kind of new part-time job. System window about part-time work. The name of the one who came is Feed Cerberus, the employer is Hades, and the requirement for divine power is that it should be above 10,000. No work experience is required, but experience in taming divine beasts will be a plus. The job description is as follows. Cerberus has been sitting alone for 3 days while Hades is on a business trip to Olympus. The task for the worker is simple. He just needs to take care of Cerberus. Full insurance is included. The payment will be 200 plus 200 Hades. In the postscript, Hades asks why there are still no volunteers, and notes that he will double the price. From the notes only that the dog does not bite. Mad from the amount of payment, Nate grabs the system window and screams, not believing that such happiness has fallen on him, that Chloe with her stalking can wait. He presses the accept button and starts moving, saying that he went and he doesn't care even if he has to starve. A view of a gloomy forest, a castle rises in the distance, hidden behind the fog, and in the middle of the river someone is sitting in a boat. The sky opens up with a bright beam of light green energy, and crows begin to fly towards it. MC lands in the boat, and rubbing his head, says that he has even begun to get used to falling. Then a bright light begins to fall on the hero, from which he, squinting, covers himself with his hand and asks what it is. A withered man with a lantern in his hand looks at the reader, and the hero asks who dared to blind him. The hero's face distorts in horror when he notices the man, and he begins to squeal with fear. He suddenly jumps up and gets to his feet. Looking around, he realizes that they are in the middle of the river. The hero looks back and thinks, realizing that it is a boat. The withered man raises his hand and shakes the lantern a little, beginning to address the MC. The view changes to the withered man staring at the reader, noting that the hero is not dead. His face is in shadow, and there is a river running behind him, and he says that it is the river Styx and that it carries the souls of the lost. The view zooms out, and the withered man stands in front of Nate, and he tells him that the way is closed to mortals. The hero is in close-up, and it dawns on him, and he realizes that if this is the river Styx, then the withered man standing in front of him is Charon, the boatman. He scratches his head and says that he is there on important business and asks if Charon can help him cross the river. The hero, still clutching his neck, is clearly annoyed that Charon, calling him a baby, is telling him to run back. In a close-up of the withered man's angry face, the hero asks where he can find Hades, to which he is answered angrily, asking how dare someone like him so recklessly utter Hades' name. The hero, playing dumb, spreads his arms in disbelief and smiles, saying that he should call him Hades, or asking what else, and asks, clearly mockingly, if he should call him by his title, listing options such as ruler of the underworld, god of the dead, and his excellency. Charon looms over Nate menacingly, asking if he values life, to which the hero asks if Charon provoked him. Charon's scythe begins to appear in his hand, and he says that he definitely warned the impudent fellow in front of him. He raises the scythe above his head and, hiding his face in the shadows, says that the hero must return. Charon's eyes glow white and he holds the scythe to his head, saying that many hot low-level gods have fallen at his hands, and the hero, mockingly, says that the withered one is a real machine. Bringing the scythe to the hero's head, the boatman says that this is useless and unthinkable, and that this is Nate's last chance and that he should run home. Grinning, the hero shows the middle finger. Intercepting the scythe with both hands, Charon prepares to attack and shouts that the hero is acting too presumptuously. He aims the scythe at MC's neck, shouting as he attacks that he understood him and will give him death since such is his desire. The hero, emotionless, looks at the reader as the scythe flies at him. The hero looks to the side, at the scythe, and begins to grin predatorily. He dodges the scythe at the last moment. He calls his pet and it begins to transform into a weapon. Charon starts attacking again, swinging his scythe and shouting that the hero must accept death with dignity, and he will, in that case, ferry him across the river. Nate looks at the tip of the scythe flying at him. He attacks the scythe, breaking it in two. Charon looks with angry eyes, tense to such an extent that his capillaries burst and his eyes turn red. He asks how such a valuable thing got into the hands of the newcomer. MC plays with the club in his hand, smirks and asks if his reaction means that the myths are true and whether the withered one will not recognize the club. He grins predatorily in response, and his face distorts in anger. He raises his hand and says that of course he will recognize that this is the club of Hephaestus and remembers the human degenerate who beat him and swam across the river alive. Charon is hit on the head by Hephaestus' club while he is trying to finish talking about the fact that the man did not even pay him. Charon scratches his head after the blow, and MC threw the club on his back. He says that the boatman talks too much and orders to hurry because he is in a hurry, to which Charon asks to at least pay for the ride. The hero takes the club in his hands and grins angrily, bowing his head, showing the withered one that he does not even want to hear such a thing, to which he, starting to cry, tells him to sit down and that they are leaving. View of the kingdom of the dead, the moon is shining brightly. The boat moors to the ground. MC turns his back to the boatman and begins to get out of the boat, thanking Charon for giving him a ride. He, while MC does not see, takes out his spear again. He swings at the hero, thinking that Nate is a reckless bad man and that if he lets down his guard even for a moment, he will die right there and let him, since he did so, die. He, hanging over him from behind, almost attacks him, but the system window notifies that the power of the god of swords, intuition, is activated. Close up of MC's eyes, they glow with a bright blue light. He calmly dodges the impending threat, slightly dodging to the right. Close up of Nate's face. Charon, extremely surprised by this turn of events, close up. The hero turns to the frightened boatman and thinks that now he understands how intuition works and that this feeling, as if the body itself reacted, and Charon, at this moment, does not understand how he did it. MC turns around and strikes with his club, and his face is distorted in a mocking grin. He says that this will not do and the boatman needs to be thoroughly beaten, in response to which he screams. Close up of a distorted Charon, whose face is hidden in the shadow of the hood. MC looks at him predatory, and he asks him to wait. The boatman lies battered and shaking in his boat, covered in his own blood, and Nate, standing on the shore, shakes himself off and thinks it's not nice that he wasted his precious time. Nate is approached and turns around a little, asked if he is the man from the ad. A girl with a bright aura, red eyes and blonde hair, she hesitantly asks if he is a temporary worker. She fixes her hair and smiles softly. It is the goddess of the underworld and fertility Persephone. She says that she is pleased to meet him and that her husband was very angry that no one responded and says that if the hero had not come, then she would have had to take on this job. Confused hero close up, he says that yes, he is Nate, their temporary worker, and thinks to himself if he is Aphrodite, but realizes that since her husband is Hades, then she must be Persephone. She nods her head to the side and says that she asks to allow the hero to be escorted to Cerberus. A view of the sky in the underworld, crows are sitting on the branches, and the girl says that Cerberus lives far away. They walk through the forest, with their backs to the reader. She says that they used to call Cerberus to them, but Hades said not to do it anymore, to which the worker asks why. She turns to him, and smiling softly, says that it is because half of the hero's predecessors, who also took on the job, immediately ran away, only seeing Cerberus, and that for this reason. Her husband decided that first the workers should show their skills at a meeting with Charon, to prove their ability to negotiate, to which the hero understandingly notes that this, it turns out, was a test. Close up of the nervous eyes of the hero, he thinks that he understands his predecessors, because Cerberus from the legends is a terrible monster, the overseer of the underworld, and realizes that he is nervous. Flaming in confidence, to calm himself, he decisively punches his hand, and behind him the fire of his determination is visualized. He thinks that he is the great god of swords and that even if it is about Cerberus, then for him he is just a dog, and his companion, not understanding what he is doing, smiles in his direction. They approach some gates, lava traces are spreading on the ground, and Persephone, looking around, says that they are in place and that Cerberus is right in front of him. In front of the gate sits a huge three-headed dog. He stands on the hot ground, and from under his paw, which is shown in close-up, steam comes out. The dog with flaming scarlet eyes looks at the hero, and saliva oozes from his mouth. MC's face, from which there is hopelessness, from which he smiles, he swears to himself. The system window with the description of the task and a note that the dog does not bite is highlighted separately. Nate smiles desperately in close-up, and Persephone asks him if he is okay, to which he, having come to his senses, laughs nervously and answers that of course. The girl at this time takes out a scroll and shakes it, saying that this is a manual warning about the dog, which her husband wrote and that he should read it before starting. He asks again about the warning. Persephone hands MC the package and he reaches for it, thinking that everything is correct because Hades threw it to the devil dog empty-handed. He happily opens the package, thinking that Hades foresaw everything. Unopened package in MC's hands, it has Cerberus's preferences and triggers written on it that he is usually affectionate. But the risk of injury increases during feeding and it is worth taking care of your hands, head, body in general, legs and everything else, and then the worker will not be bitten. Below are described situations that require special care. Among them are when Cerberus guards the gates of the underworld, when Cerberus lies on his tummy, when Cerberus sits, when Cerberus washes his paws, when Cerberus yawns and so on, which raises questions in Nate. He throws the package on the ground in rage, screaming if they are mocking him, and that Hades just wants him to die, to which a smiling Persephone says that there is a schedule written on the back, and that it needs to be checked, and that Hades wrote it, so it is reliable and accurate. The package lying on the ground, MC asks again about the schedule. He holds the package in his hands and looks at the back of it, shaking. There is written the daily schedule of Cerberus. It has 3 points. This is breakfast and a walk, lunch and a walk, dinner and a walk. Everyone has a note that all this is only for the underworld. MC in a rage tears the list to pieces, and he screams that this is nonsense, and asks how he is supposed to take this devilish machine for a walk and that Hades should shove this schedule somewhere deep in his chest, and that the announcement only talked about feeding and asks what kind of devilish trick is this. MC, choking from his rampage, stands with his head bowed, trying to catch his breath, and Hades' wife, gently leaning next to him, says that it is okay if he changes his mind. She puts her hand to her cheek and looks away sadly, saying that she is a little worried because her husband caught the previous worker when he escaped and now he is locked in hell, and comments that he is such a poor boy. A terrified MC, sweating profusely, imagines all of his limbs being torn off, while Persephone continues the story about Hades tore off all of the previous workers' limbs and that she is sorry that she cannot tell him more. Then upon seeing MC's face, says that she should not have said that and tells him that he needs to run now. He, in response, begins to silently examine the 2 parts of the package. He bends down and begins to do something with his hands. He picks up Hades' glued instructions and smiles nervously while his employer's wife looks on laughingly. He says, laughing, that he screwed up a little while coming to his senses and asks where he should start, and silently says that he misses his mother. He turns around and sees figures carrying large chunks of meat in a cart, and Persephone tells him he needs to feed the dog first and asks if he saw the nymphs carrying the meat to the warehouse, and he asks if he should join them and says the meat looks heavy but is pulled out of his thoughts by Hades' wife, who says her husband also tore off the limbs of workers who tried to trick him. A view of the underworld. Nate, shaking and bent over from the weight, is carrying 3 pieces of meat on his hump and says what he brought and asks what he should do next, to which the girl notes his excellent work. She turns and points to Cerberus with her hand, and the hero, sitting with the meat in his hands, turns in the direction she points. She says he can throw the pieces of meat one at a time to Cerberus. A close-up of the dog's head, he is beaming and his mouth is drooling with anticipation. The hero exhales, saying that the dog is growling terribly, and asks if even Cerberus becomes like a regular dog when he is being fed. He shows him a piece of meat, standing up to his full height with it, and Cerberus looks at him sweetly. He says that he has meat and asks if he wants to eat it. He remembers how he worked part-time at a pet cafe and sat playing with 3 dogs, and thinks that working with Cerberus reminds him of that time, and that big dogs have their own charm. A close-up of the guardian of the underworld's face, the hero notes that if you look closely, he even looks a little cute. Sitting in front of Cerberus, he slaps the ground, giving Cerberus the command to sit. With a blow of his paw, Cerberus throws mud at MC. He looks at him, 2 heads are laughing, and the third one is sitting discontentedly. Persephone is bursting with laughter, looking at the MC covered in mud. The hero is looking at the reader discontentedly, and Hades' wife is laughing behind him, saying that they finally have an interesting worker. Cerberus is sitting on the ground, scratching the chin of one of the heads, and the girl says that giving him commands is pointless because he only listens to Hades. And Cerberus is sitting in such a pose, as if telling him to give him food as soon as possible, and MC replies discontentedly that now he understands why no one responded. He angrily grabs a piece of meat. Then he throws it to Cerberus with a grin on his face, shouting that here, his meat, let him catch it. The piece of meat flies right into the eyes of the central head. The remaining heads burst into laughter, and Nate, apologizing, says that he miscalculated his strength. A piece of meat flies into each laughing head, and Nate, laughing, says that you can't laugh at a friend. Cerberus' angry, grinning face with meat on his eyes. Cerberus suddenly lifts his paw from the ground. The hero looks at all this with an emotionless look. Cerberus runs up and growls in his face, standing a little further away. The dog's chain knocks, not letting him run further. MC's grin close up. He taps Cerberus on the area below the nose and mockingly tells him, asking what he can do while he sits on the chain and laughs. The dog begins to try even harder to run closer to Nate, and the ground under his feet begins to split. The chain begins to break. He makes the hero recoil with a kick to the ground. He looms over him with a broken chain, indicating that the jokes are over, and MC tells him to slow down. He looks at the broken piece of chain and asks why the dog broke the chain too. Cerberus tries to bite MC, but he jumps back in time, cursing. Persephone stands calmly and looks at the chain up close, saying that it did break, and Hero, sitting to the side, yells, asking why it's frozen. Cerberus raises his head up and starts howling while the hero grabs the girl's hand and yells at her to run. While running, MC looks back at the dog and says that this crazy dog almost bit them because of a simple joke, and Persephone notices a wound on his shoulder and asks if his hand is okay, to which he replies that it's just a scratch. While running, he yells at Persephone and points his finger back, asking why the chain broke so easily, and that if it was old, it needed to be replaced, to which the companion, incomprehensibly, replies that she herself encounters such a thing for the first time. Cerberus catches up with the heroes, and he yells that the dog is too fast and they need to push harder, to which Hades' wife replies that no, and that he needs to stay closer to her. A close-up of Nate's face, he asks why this is necessary. Close-up of the girl's confident face, she says that even though she looks like that, she is still Hades' wife, and the dog will not attack while she is around. They stop and look back at the dog, who has already opened his mouth wide to bite, shouting over the dog's roar. Nate asks if he is sure he will not attack, to which, laughing uncertainly, Hades' wife answers that he does. MC pushes the girl away from the dog's bite and screams, calling for Snowball. He jumps high up, out of the dog's bite, and calls for Hephaestus Club. Concentrating his energy, he flies straight at the dog. Close up of the hero's serious face, and he, calling Cerberus names, screams that he will get it now. Effectively flipping in the air, he landed, hitting the dog's head with all his might. But she simply raises her paw and prepares to hit him. The dog throws MC far away with his blow, and he hits the ground. All in blood, he shakes, bares his teeth, and thinks why the dog is so strong. A bright scarlet light comes from the dog's eyes, and he looks angrily at the reader. Hades' frightened wife screams that Nate needs to save himself. He sits with a confused look, trying to come to his senses from the dog's blow, and behind him, from the river, the hands of the dead crawl out. The girl tries to shout to him that if he falls into the river Styx, then Cerberus will catch him and eat him, but he thinks that everything in his head is like a fog and that he cannot hear what is being said to him. A frightened Persephone close up, she thinks that it seems that she stunned the hero and thinks what to do. She approaches Cerberus and tries to stop him, giving him a stop sign and screaming that he should stop, giving him a command to sit, and screaming again that she ordered him to stop. Close up of Cerberus' eyes filled with anger, she screams at him that he should listen to her and calls him a mongrel. But the dog does not listen and takes off, continuing his onslaught on MC, and Persephone desperately screams after him. Cerberus is already a few meters away from Nate, and continues to run, raising the earth behind him. MC thinks that this is his end, that he came to feed the dog, but in the end he himself became food. Grinning like a madman in the face of imminent death, the hero says that this is nonsense. He jumps back with his foot. Spreading his arms, he flies into the river Styx, looking at Cerberus and screaming that he refuses to die like this. Persephone, terrified, covers her face with her hands. A view of the water, and the girl can be heard screaming the hero's name. The hero, listlessly sinking under the water, thinks that he is very cold, and realizes that he cannot even move a finger. His slightly open eyes, his head in close up, he wonders if he is dying. He remembers how he showed the middle finger and thinks that he is as if in a dream. He remembers how the system descended on him and thinks that everything that has happened to him so far. He remembers his part-time jobs, building a dungeon, how he fought with dwarves, and how he cleared the dungeon that he built himself, and he thinks that all the part-time jobs he toiled at his whole life were just an illusion. He sinks even deeper into the water in close up. He remembers the things from the divine shop, Odin's spear, Gungnir, the Nemean lion armor, and the amulet, and thinks, regretting that there is so much junk from the divine shop that he once wanted for himself, and could not buy. It is as if his memories come out of the hero, and he reaches out to them with his hand, thinking that it seems to him as if consciousness has left his body, and his thoughts are rushing forward, and he remembers that they say that when you die, your whole life flies before your eyes. A snowball, violently waving its paws, tries to swim to the hero's hand, and the hero, relaxing his hand, thinks that it cannot come closer. Snowball stops a few meters from the hero, who has already abandoned all thoughts of fighting, and thinks that at least his pet should survive. Snowball almost swims to MC, squeezing his cheeks from the fact that almost all the oxygen left him. He grabs his master by the mouth and opens his mouth wide, releasing oxygen. Then he bites him hard on the nose, waking him up from his delirium and causing him to open his eyes wide. He mumbles something to his fox, crying in pain as his nose bleeds profusely. He turns around and notices hands pulling him down. One of the hands grabs him by the neck and he tries to understand what it is. He opens his mouth and air rushes out in a stormy stream. He mentally sighs and notices that his eyes are darkening. The fox cub howls restlessly, looking at his master. He remembers his fight with the fire fist and remembers that he has the dwarven hammer skill, and mentally sends everything to hell, realizing that he simply has to. Snowball begins to turn into a hammer like the fire fists. He pushes away the dead hands that were dragging him deeper with one swing. The hands begin to reach out with renewed strength, close up. The hero swings his hammer again, preparing to strike, a grin on his face. The system reports that the skill has been activated, and the hero uses a sweeping motion to push the dead hands away from himself even further, using the dwarven hammer skill. Suddenly, the rest of the air leaves him, and he covers his face with his hand, thinking to himself that he cannot breathe. He turns around, Snowball returns to his fox form, and they wave their arms wildly, surfacing. The surface of the river Styx. A seething black dot appears on the surface of the water. Snowball and Nate swim up, and MC greedily inhales air, finding himself on the surface. They swim to the ground, and he grabs it with his hand, screaming that he has returned from the dead. A large shadow hangs over him, and he looks up with one eye. Cerberus, not having cooled down during MC's absence, is already finishing his bite, growling furiously. The hero is terrified, understands that he won't have time to do anything. Cerberus bites him to the waist. The hero screams in panic, being in the dog's throat. Suddenly, he notices something and calms down. He sees a system window that says that the effect of the river Styx is activated and its duration is an hour. Many system windows appear that explain what happened. One of them repeats the previous one, that the effect of the river Styx is activated, that he has received immunity to poisons, stunning, blood loss, and to all physical attacks. The hero, wide-eyed, flooded with light from the system windows, asks, addressing all living things, what is happening? Still in the mouth of Cerberus, he rests his hand on his tongue and looks at the system windows with interest, trying to understand what kind of effect the river Styx is. A memory of a myth comes to his mind. A woman stands next to a child wrapped in a sheet. The myth said that if you dip into the river Styx, you will become an invincible warrior. The woman holds the baby by the heels, dipping him into the water. The goddess Tethys dipped her newborn son in the river Styx to make him the strongest warrior in history. But his heels did not touch the water. A beautiful illustration, on one side colored, on the other faded, depicting Achilles. He remembers that the fact that the heels did not touch the water is due to the fact that Tethys held the baby by them. That's where the expression about Achilles' heel comes from. A close-up of the hero's eye, he realizes that he has dipped from head to toe. Meanwhile, Cerberus shakes his head, trying to figure out Nate, and he thinks that he is now invincible, and Persephone screams, looking at this picture. She grabs MC's hand and leans back to pull harder, trying to free him from Cerberus' jaws. Cerberus shakes his head, preventing Persephone from pulling Nate out, and she screams, asking if the hero is alive, and turning to Cerberus, screaming that he should let him go. Cerberus displeasedly spits out MC, and he hits the ground, which is looked back by the shocked wife of Hades. She starts running towards him, not seeing what happened to him because of the dust that has risen. She screams, asking if he is okay. They, with Snowball, lie on the ground, covered in drool, and the girl screams that it is an abomination. He moves his gaze to her and displeasedly asks how she can call someone who just returned from the dead an abomination, and notes that this is too harsh, and she says that she is sorry and that she could not help him. MC gets up and the girl, scared, asks if he's okay. He stands there shaking himself off, complaining about the mud, and she asks him how he can be okay after falling into the river Styx, to which he replies that he just swam out. Cerberus approaches them, but they do not notice it yet, and the surprised Persephone asks in what sense he just swam out and emphasizes that he just swam out from there. To which the hero replies that this is true, he just swam out rowing with a hammer, to which an even more surprised Persephone replies that she has never heard of such a thing. The dog bites MC on the hand. He lifts him into the air, after which he hits the ground with force under the frightened screams of Hades' wife. Cerberus, wide-eyed, notices something. The hero, yawning, lies on the ground and asks if the dog is finished. MC's hand is in Cerberus' mouth, but he cannot bite it. He asks what, is he too hard for him, and laughing, he notices that his hand does not even itch. Persephone stands dumbfounded by this sight, thinking that this can't be true, that it's incredible that a low-level deity is perfectly fine after being bitten by Cerberus, and realizes that he was blessed with immortality. With sparkling eyes and a bright grin, he lies down, resting one hand on the ground, saying that he fed the dog, and that it was his problem if he wasn't hungry, and asks if it's time for a walk. The guy stands in front of a three-headed monster on a chain. One of the monster's heads is bared in Nate's direction. Exhaling, the guy asks him with a tired smile that he knows that this is useless, and he continues to growl, adding that if he continues, there will be no walk. Suddenly, the monster's mouth abruptly closes, and he opens his eyes from what he heard. Exhaling, the wolf's muzzle looks at the hero. The monster instantly turns away from the guy sitting in front of him. Looking at the wolf's shaking tail, the hero thinks that it worked in the dog cafe, and yet, he is different from ordinary dogs. The wolf takes a huge chain in his mouth. The hero sees how the wolf's head in the middle holds his chain leash, which is completely torn. Looking at the wolf's excited face, the guy says that no, he is exactly the same as the dog. Connecting the chains with his hands, Nate says the word like this. Suddenly, Persephone, behind the guy, calls out to the protagonist. Smiling, closing her eyes and showing one finger up, she tells him that Cerberus has not been walked for a long time, and let him walk as slowly as possible. Looking at the girl and holding the chain in one hand, the guy tells her that he understood everything, asking her not to worry, adding that in the dog cafe they called him the puppy president, so it's nothing. Without finishing, the guy's body suddenly jerked to the side. Flying on a chain, his mouth open in shock, he shouts at the wolf to stop. The protagonist rolls his jaw on the sand, and then he gets rocks on his cheeks. Screaming in shock, continuing to hold onto the chain, the guy chases Cerberus. A notification appears stating that a new skill has been acquired, wind speed. The guy looks at the notification with even more shock, asking what the hell is that. An elegant girl's foot in a shoe steps onto the ground. He begins to run after the guy, asking him from behind what he is doing. Running next to the guy, parallel to the guy, she shouts at him to use divine power to strengthen his body. Opening his eyes in shock, the guy asks her the word what, wondering in his mind how she can keep up with them. The girl continues to run next to him, shouting at the guy that she is telling him to strengthen his body with divine power because Cerberus is too strong. The guy looks at the girl with confusion at her question about why he does not use divine power. Looking at the notification stat, he thinks about using power, asking that is not a stat, and it can be used. Continuing to fly on a chain next to the girl, he asks her how to do it, to which she asks him that he does not know how to use divine power. The guy's positive answer to the question in a moment stopped the girl from shock. Stopping behind the guy on a chain, she screams at him that this cannot be, asking in what sense he means this, to which the guy screams at her that he is telling everything honestly and has no idea how this happened. Opening his mouth and his teeth with gums, the guy screams, asking how much longer he is going to run. The girl, running with all her strength next to her, tells Nate to remember how it feels when he uses the force. Looking at the blonde, Nate shouts that he does not understand her, to which she urges him on with words. Squinting, the guy asks himself in his head what he feels when he uses power. Remembering the fight with monsters and the notifications that come during it, he tells himself in his head that in the battle with Charon it activated on its own, and he did not even notice. Continuing to run, the girl shouts to him that he remembered the image, and imagined that magic, like water, spreads over his body and let him control it. Closing his eyes, Nate thinks about the image. Imagining water in the dark, he thinks about how it needs to be controlled. The guy slowly opens his eyes. His hand with the chain begins to illuminate the magic. His leg, under the influence of magic, also begins to stop its movement. The dog stopped abruptly in front, opening his eyes in shock. The protagonist stands with a chain, holding the wolf. Gritting his teeth and pulling the dog towards him, he asks if he really stopped. The girl looks at the tense guy, noting that this is great, and that's how it's done. He needs to focus the divine power on the part of the body he wants to strengthen. The enraged wolf takes the chain in his teeth, looking at the guy. The hero's legs begin to come closer to the wolf, and he says that he is pulling him. Gritting his teeth from the weight, the guy drops a word of abuse. Squeezing the chain with his hand, he wants to say something to the dog. Pulling the chain towards himself even more, opening his eyes from the weight, he shouts at him to be a good boy, thinking about how he needs to think about the body part and then focus the divine power. At one point, he pulls the chain towards himself, causing the wolf to fly into the air. The girl opened her mouth from the shock of the shadow falling on her. She sees how the main character, by pulling the chain towards himself, knocked the wolf down right in front of him. Holding the chain and looking at him, Nate says that he has had enough walking for today, and they go back. The wolf's head began to grin, looking at the hero, to which he asks him what he is going to resist. Grinning just as contentedly, Nate says that then he will do it the hard way. The guy walks next to Persephone with a chain on his shoulder, pulling the huge body of a disgruntled dog behind him. The girl covers her mouth with her hand from what she saw. Turning to the guy, she, holding her hand to her mouth, tells him that he used divine power for the first time and is doing so well. Walking next to him and looking at Nate from the side, Persephone says that it looks like they have an excellent worker this time. The hero looks at the blonde with caution, thinking that this is somehow strange, asking himself that she is strong enough, so why did not she intervene, and even he, a lower level god, is able to stop him. The hero looks at the girl, asking her if he can ask a question, to which she answers positively. Looking down at the girl, he asks her why she does not approach Cerberus. With her mouth slightly open in surprise, she listens to the guy's assumption that she could easily cope with him. The girl lowers her head down. Looking at her hands with a blue bracelet, she replies that it is all because of the restrictions. The protagonist looks at the girl, who turns her head to the side, asking again about the restrictions. Introducing Cerberus, chains in hands of other people in advance, she says that Cerberus guards the underworld and does not allow countless lost souls to return to the mortal world, and also stops those who try to look at them out of curiosity. Standing in front of the surprised guy, she says that she is one of them. Looking into his eyes with a blush, she repeats once again that she is one of those who want to return. The moon illuminates the dark crowns of the forest. The guy's feet are on the ground. Remembering the moment when the guy was looking at Persephone, he thinks that she is limited in her actions here and can't do anything with Cerberus. Taking his chin with his hand, he continues to think that all she can contact is a couple of lower gods that Hades allows into his abode, like him. And that's true, because according to mythology, Hades kidnapped Persephone and imprisoned her in the underworld because he was enchanted by her beauty, adding that he thought it was nonsense, but it turned out to be true. Looking at the girl's long braid, he thinks that it is difficult to imagine how much time she spent here all alone, noticing how unhappy he is. Clenching his hand into a fist, the guy thinks that he needs to put aside his sense of heightened justice because her husband is Hades, the brother of the greatest god Zeus, asking what he can do. The protagonist lifts his head up, looking forward. The fox opposite him starts yapping, to which he does not understand what she wants. The protagonist covers one eye from the fact that she jumps on his shoulder, saying that he completely forgot about her, apologizing for this. The wolf, sliding on the ground, begins to look around, not understanding where he is. The heroes came to an atmospheric place with a bloody light. Suddenly, Cerberus pays attention to something. The dog begins to growl, to which the protagonist, standing next to the girl, asks her what came over him. Looking at the aggressive dog from behind, she explains that he follows the trail of the dead, and despite his appearance, he copes with the job with dignity, and this is also the reason why she cannot leave this place. Turning to Nate, she says that as soon as he chains the chain back, his tasks for the morning will be finished. Wrapping the chain around his hand, the guy continues to look at the girl with distrust, thinking that for a dog to watch the gods, then this Hades is a real stubborn person. Pulling the chain to himself with a tired look, Nate asks why Hades would keep a dog that only listens to him. The notification that appears says that the power of intuition is activated. The guy's eyes began to glow blue. He sees something glowing blue inside the wreckage in hell, to which Nate asks what it is. Clenching his hand into a fist and releasing magic from it, the guy tells himself in his head that he does not think that it is something alive, asking himself that it could be an object, or should he better check it. The blonde turns to the hero, telling him that the morning chores are over and he better get ready for the day's affairs. Interrupting herself, the girl calls out to the guy, who begins to seriously beat the interesting structure. She sees how the guy's hand takes out a collar with chains. The girl's face fell into a stupor from shock. Holding a huge collar in his hand and holding his head with his hand, he apologizes to Persephone, saying that it seemed to him that there was something valuable inside. The notification tells about the Cerberus collar, that Hades used it to train Cerberus, and when used, Cerberus will obey his commands. Holding the collar in her hand with a lady in the background, she says that it is incredible, asking why he hid it here. Approaching the guy with the collar, the girl says that she searched everywhere, but could not find it, asking Nate how he was able to do this, to which he, looking away, replies that it is intuition. Looking down, he asks if this collar is really so omnipotent. Holding it in his hand, he listens as the blonde tells him that Cerberus is a symbol of the underworld, and controlling it is the same as controlling this entire place. Continuing to examine the collar in his hands, the hero admits that it looks like a very ordinary collar. Holding it on top in his hand in front of the girl, the guy asks with a smile that he will not be able to use it then, because it belongs to Hades after all. Covering her chin with her hand, Persephone looks down thoughtfully. In a moment, she takes her hand away from her face. Nate looks at her with a smile, hearing that it does not matter, to which the hero asks if this is true. She, closing her eyes and taking her hand away from herself, standing in front of the guy, tells him that it was not she who found it and gave it to him, and her husband sometimes tells her to look for this collar. Slyly opening her eyes, she adds that he said, and will allow him to try to train Cerberus if she can really find it. Confidently looking at the collar, Nate thinks that the girl has accumulated a lot for Hades, and he cannot miss the opportunity to make his life easier. Standing in front of the wolf with a huge collar, he tells him to come to him and he will put the collar on him. The wolf snorts and looks away, to which Nate asks him if he hasn't learned his lesson yet. The hero smiles and asks the wolf if he hasn't learned his lesson yet. The wolf's face grins, looking at the hero. In an instant, the wolf's head is battered and crying. Looking at the frightened animal, the hero laughs and says that it suits him, and how wonderful it would be if he had been so docile from the start. The corners of the guy's lips stretch higher and higher from a smile. Pointing his hand upward, the guy shouts that he chooses Cerberus. The animal sits and stands up at the owner's commands. The wolf's eyes are in complete bewilderment at what his body is doing at the guy's command to roll. With his mouth open, the guy asks the wolf if it really works, and now he sees that there is something cute about him. Standing behind the dog, he tells him that this is for biting him and dragging him along the ground, and he will sit in the corner and think about his behavior until he says that's enough. Grinning evilly, Nate thinks that at this rate this job will really be very easy. Persephone looks at the evilly laughing hero. She touches his shoulder with her finger, calling out to him. She pokes her finger into the cheek of the guy, who asks her if she sees, and this dog can do nothing about it. She says some kind of spell, spreading it throughout the hero's body. The guy's eyes widen in shock. He falls down at the lady's feet almost unconscious. Looking at her in shock, he hears that she tells that her husband gives Cerberus 2 orders. The first is to watch the dead, who are trying to escape from the underworld. Languidly looking down at the guy, she wants to tell him about the second. Squinting her eyes and looking at Nate's eyes that were gradually leaving his soul, she says that the second was to follow her, to which the guy says in his thoughts that he is sleepy. Turning to him, the girl wishes him sweet dreams. Turning her back, she says that she will return before Hades arrives and let him not worry. The guy sees only the girl's underwear, thinking that this is true, that for Hades the most important thing is not the underworld. Lifelessly looking forward on the ground, the guy thinks that he cannot. His eyes gradually close. The protagonist opens his eyes from the sound of Snow White's yapping. He sees the fox right above him against the background of a dark forest. Lying on the ground, the guy says Snow White's name. In a moment, the protagonist's eyes opened in shock. He, getting up from the ground, asks what he did, passed out. Turning around, Nate asks where Persephone is. He looks around, but there is no one. Covering his chin with sweat, the hero thinks about something. Opening his eyes and sucking his lips, the guy thinks that he is finished. Looking at the stat with a notification, he asks how long he slept. The notification that appears says that the river Styx effect has occurred and 5 minutes and 20 seconds have passed, to which the guy says that thank God that not so much time has passed. Running away from the wolf to the side with the fox on his shoulder, he shouts to him that he is leaving and let him guard the gate. Running forward, the guy thinks about how Persephone could not leave the underworld before because of Cerberus. Looking into the dark thicket, he continues to think that if it becomes known that she ran away because of him, then Hades will beat all the nonsense out of him. Turning back to the fox, he asks how far she went, adding that he must quickly find her and take her back as soon as possible. A new notification appears stating that the wind speed skill has been acquired, to which the guy thinks that he himself has acquired a new skill. He steps his foot on the ground, enveloping himself in blue magic. A new notification appears stating that the wind speed skill has been activated, and the skill increases significantly based on the user's physical abilities. The protagonist's eyes widen at what he sees. He runs from side to side across the dark field. Turning back, the guy is shocked by his own speed, noting that it is very fast. Sitting on one knee on the ground, he looks forward, saying that he will try to activate the skill while using divine power. In an instant, the guy jumps away from his location. He flies towards the thicket. Suddenly, in mid-flight, fluttering his hair, he notices something in front of him. Looking at the river, he sees a boat with Persephone standing in it. Looking at her, he shouts that there she is. Water splashes against the sides of the boat. The night planet illuminates the girl's face on the boat. She turns around sharply, asking what it was, hearing a sound from the forest. Looking at the front of the boat, she asks herself that maybe she ran over a stone. From the water, right in front of her, the main character emerges, scaring the girl to death. Looking at Persephone with a terrible look, Nate asks her if she is in a hurry somewhere. Against the background of the landscape, the guy shouts to her that she told him that even the dead are not allowed to cross the river Styx. Shouting at the girl, and she, holding out her hands in front of him, asks her how he will explain this to him, to which she apologizes to him, saying that she just really wanted to see her mother. Recalling his moments with his mother, the guy's face fell into shock. Standing in front of the blonde, he sadly tells her that she planned everything. The girl, winking and holding her index finger to her face, tells the hero not to worry, and her husband will return only in 2 days, adding that it is a secret, but the guy is the first one to catch her. Open-mouthed in surprise, the hero wonders in his thoughts that this is not the first time she has done this. Suddenly, the boat crashes into a rock, causing the hero to stagger. The bottom of the boat has completely split. Water splashes on the guy and the girl. Nate, looking away, thinks that the boat is unlikely to hold up, to which a notification says that the effect of the river Styx will last for another 15 seconds. Standing together on one boat on the river, the guy thinks that it looks like they have no choice. The hero goes down to the water on the boat, holding his nose with his hand. He falls into the water in an instant, splashing it. He abruptly emerges from the water, greedily gulping air. The hero's hand grabbed the side of the boat. He aggressively began to swim forward, saying that come what may, ordering the characters to hold on tighter. The heroes stand on the shore next to the boat. Suddenly, they find themselves in a sunny valley. Stretching, Persephone, with a smile, notes how wonderful it is there, causing a tired reaction from the guy in the background. Suddenly, the girl is distracted by the guy's question about whether she will promise him something, asking what. Looking at the blonde with irritation, he tells her to promise that they will return right after he sees his mother. Winking at the guy, she says that Nate is too worried because she has never been caught. Taking the hero by the hand, he tells her that he is definitely finished if she is caught, to which Persephone says that everything will be fine, and since he is so worried, then maybe he will go with her after all. The bright sun illuminated the crowns of the trees. The girl calls the main character to follow her into the cave, to which Nate says why all the Greek gods live in caves. The girl enthusiastically says the word mother. A woman with a red headband sitting on a chair turns to her, to which history says that this is the goddess of fertility Demeter. She gets up from the table, coming up to her, asking what's going on, to which the blonde tells her that it's her. Taking her daughter by the cheeks with both hands, Demeter looks at her, asking if it's really her, to which the girl replies that of course it is, and who else. The women joined hands with each other, and close to each other, began to cry. Looking at the ladies, Nate, rubbing his nose, thinking that he is here like a fifth leg for a dog. Suddenly, the guy's attention moves to something else. Next to his feet, he sees a growing flower, thinking that in myths the earth withered from Demeter's grief for her daughter when she was in the underworld. Looking at the most beautiful white flowers, he continues to think that if we talk about their world, then we can say that winter was beginning. Persephone's eyes opened in surprise from the main character's word that he has things to do and needs to go. The girl turns to the guy waving at them and asks him that he won't follow her, to which the hero tells her that they will meet by the river at 8. The guy turns around at his name, called by the girl. Standing in an embrace with her mother, she thanks him. The moon continues to illuminate the dark forest. Standing near a boat with glowing flowers, the guy says that everything is ready. Holding the phone in his hand, he looks at the time, saying that she should already be here. Suddenly, behind the guy, someone's hand begins to kill the flowers. Turning around with a smile, the hero says that here is the girl. Suddenly, his eyes widen in fear. He sees a brunette man in a suit with a flower in his hands, who says that it means that a boar has come to him for a part-time job. Notifications began to say that the intuition skill was activated and danger and death are coming. Widening his eyes even more, the guy sees that the system is telling him that he will die. Hades, burning the flower in his hands with his magic, looks at Nate, asking where his wife Persephone is. Nate's face showed horror. He did not understand why Hades returned so early. He looked at him calmly, frowning a little. He could not understand how someone like Nate could find the collar of Cerberus and help Persephone escape. The guy broke out in a sweat. Hades reached out to the boy. He pressed his hand to his forehead, wanting him to die. Nate was overcome with horror. Someone's voice was heard. The guy was surprised. Persephone came and looked at everything that was happening. She did not understand why Hades was trying to send an innocent deity to the next world. Hades turned to her. He was trying to find Persephone. The girl began to yell at him. He himself ordered the workers to find the collar of Cerberus. The guy did it, so why was Hades mad? They stood there, looking into each other's eyes. He let out a breath and bowed his head. In his opinion, she had slipped away without saying anything. The goddess crossed her arms and gave him an irritated look. She had only gone out for a short while. She would have come back as soon as she had seen her mother. Hades looked upset. She should have said so. She turned her head away from him. Did she have to report every little thing? Did he take her for a child? Nate looked at them. He noticed that Hades seemed a little worried. The boy was looking down. He was genuinely worried about Persephone. The girl looked at him. It was time for them to return to the underworld. She handed Nate a gift. Hades was upset that Persephone wanted to keep him alive. The boy had done his job well and deserved a gift. The girl poked Nate in the head. She smiled tenderly at him. She promised to take care of his salary, no need to send a request to the system. And she also threatened him not to come back there anymore. A bright pillar of magic illuminated the forest. Dust rose in the room. Nate looked exhausted. How many times had he almost died on these part-time jobs? In his hands he held a gift from Persephone. He began to unpack the box. He wondered what was in it. Light began to come out of the box. The guy was surprised. There were 2 apples in this box. The first apple was the forbidden fruit. It grants the ability to distinguish evil from good. The second was a golden apple. It was a symbol of immortality, the fruit of the gods. Grants eternal youth. His mouth opened at what he saw. Putting his hand to his chin, he thought, are people allowed to try divine fruits? In one hand he took the golden apple. In the other he took the forbidden fruit. Holding it in his hand, he began to examine it. They were actually offering him to eat it. It was daytime. A scream was heard from one of the offices. Nate and his mother were sitting at the doctor's. The doctor was holding his head with one hand and holding documents in the other. He told her good news. The cancer cells had miraculously disappeared completely. How could this even happen? His hand moved to his glasses. He confirmed that it was true, but there was no scientific explanation for this in modern medicine. Mom covered her mouth. Her eyes started to water. She didn't understand how this was possible. How could such a miracle happen? They walked, hugging each other with one arm. The golden apple worked. Nate's mind was recalling the picture of that day. He made juice and gave it to his mother to drink. The guy was leading her to the exit. The doctors said that she was completely healthy, so they could go home. They walked hand in hand to a taxi. The guy opened the door for his mother so that she could get in. The guy got in the front and told him the address where they were going. The driver was a little worried. He warned him that they would have to make a circle to get home. Nate didn't understand why. It would be faster to go straight through Uedo Park. The driver calmly told him that there was a disaster near the park. He turned up the radio. The radio was broadcasting a live report from the Blish dungeon of Uedo Park. A cylindrical massif had recently appeared out of nowhere, and the residents were continuing to evacuate. Guilds and individual hunters had gathered together to investigate, but there were complications due to traffic jams. The boy was horrified by this news. His mother grabbed his shoulder. They looked at each other. The woman could get there herself, but he had to walk. Smiling tenderly, she couldn't wait to see him on TV. The boy got out of the taxi. His mother warned him that she would be waiting for him on the news. The main thing is that he didn't embarrass himself. He waved to her. The sun was already setting behind the horizon. The boy looked at the cylinder. It was built in the shape of a tower. Shielding his face from the sun, he realized that he would have to work all night long. A smile appeared on his face. He turned towards the divine store. He wanted to check it out. Looking at his balance, he realized that the salary had not been transferred yet. He updated his profile. He had a title, Tamed Cerberus. He was surprised. He decided to look at the explanation. He was the one who tamed the charismatic guard dog of the underworld. From now on, all dogs will obey your commands. He is the master of dogs. He did not understand how he could be the master of dogs. Some man shouted in his direction. The guy began to turn away. Chloe was being interviewed. They asked her to say literally a few words about what was happening. This was a regular dungeon, not like that labyrinth, and the dungeon was almost cleared out. Why did they have to come in person? The guy exhaled. They were not talking to him as he thought. She turned to the reporters. In keeping with tradition, the Sangan Guild always arrives at disaster sites. They wanted to ask her one more question, but she decided to end it there. Nate looked at the reporter who was trying to shout to the girl. He covered his face with his hood. He needed to move. Chloe was standing among the people. They were talking among themselves. Two of them were discussing their topics and laughing. They say the last person to come in was mauled by a dog. His interlocutor was shocked. Did he see it with his own eyes? Chloe waved her hand and shut them up. They began to talk more quietly. The girl turned to Chloe. She looked at the back of her head. She did not understand what was wrong with her. Her behavior was clearly different. Chloe just walked straight ahead. There was a corridor ahead. Torches were burning. They illuminated the way. The guys stopped. Chloe bowed her head. They were approaching. A huge dog was running towards them. There were several more of the same kind behind it. The guys were scared when they saw them. One of them started screaming. They had not been warned about this. They were zombie dogs. Even the slightest scratch from their fangs soaked in poison would kill anyone in 10 minutes. The girl was clearly scared. The dog's tongue was hanging out. Its poison was dripping onto the floor. They are incredibly poisonous creatures. Chloe began to take out her weapon. This was quite a problematic enemy. The dogs were approaching them. Those who were strong in close combat, they moved away and the rest followed Chloe. Someone's voice was heard. The girl began to yell at those who were with them. The guy waved his hands, saying that it was not him. He assumed that the sound came from the dogs. The guys looked in their direction. Among the dogs stood a guy. It was Nate. The girl was shocked. How could he tame zombie dogs? Nate petted one of the dogs. As a rule, if you do not know who your opponent is, then do not consider the enemy. The girl prepared for battle. She wanted the one who tamed them to show himself. She pointed the sword in his direction. The dog began to get angry, and the guy asked him to lower the sword. He stepped forward and smiled a little. The girl was terrified. Behind Chloe stood a dog. Nate was scared. He ran towards it, using the speed of the wind. He approached the girl. The second girl, who was his partner, got angry. Nate pushed Chloe aside. He swung his free hand. He hit the dog on the head with his fist and started scolding it. The dog sat down in front of him. The girl was surprised. Chloe turned to look at him. Nate looked at Chloe. He saw a bracelet on her arm. Looking into her eyes, he smiled. Here they met again. The guy was sure that Persephone had the same bracelet. He frowned. Chloe, bowing her head, interrupted him. There were so many witnesses around them. The guy did not understand, which surprised her. He was still kneeling and holding her hand. It must have been just a coincidence. The girl was filming everything on camera. Nate looked at the dog. The dog looked at the guys. All the dogs sat down at the guy's command. Smiling, he pointed to the spot and ordered them to dig there. Safety above all. The dogs began to dig. Sand was flying everywhere. They were digging hard. One of them found some red crystals. She barked as a sign. Nate patted her head. She was holding the crystal in her teeth. Everyone was surprised. The girl thought she was dreaming. Chloe just looked at him and didn't say anything. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked at the guy. She was amazed by his ability and wondered how he got it. Nate looked at her. Didn't everyone think that abilities were given at birth? How did she know that he earned it? He looked at him with disbelief. Still looking at Chloe, he waved it off, saying that he was born with the ability. But anyway, he was more interested in that bracelet. She looked at him calmly. Her arms were still crossed over her chest. He wondered if it was her bracelet. She took out the bracelet on her hand and showed it to her. Nate came closer. He wondered where she bought it. His face grew more irritated when she didn't answer the question. He looked into her eyes. Sometimes he glanced at the bracelet. No doubt it was the same antique design. An image of Persephone popped into his head. On her hand was the very friendship bracelet she had talked about. The guy moved closer to her hand, examining the bracelet. Nate looked at the girl. He didn't understand why she was silent. Chloe took her hand in hers and tilted her head slightly, remaining silent. Her answer shocked the guy. She bought it online. She answered him completely calmly. Looking at her hand, she offered to give him a link if he liked it so much. Nate was still standing there in confusion. He began to sweat. He began to say that he really wanted one. The girl with red hair had images of him with this bracelet in her head. They began to laugh at him and his face turned red. He coughed into his hand. He must have become more sensitive after traveling between worlds. Now he would be considered a pervert. This is how his reputation would go down the drain. He looked at Chloe. An idea occurred to him. Since it was all about that, he decided to redirect their attention. He asked her how she knew Snowball's name. Had she been digging around for information about him? She knew right away what he meant. She had just heard it from others. At the gate, she heard someone say, "Snowball, let's go." He was confused. They looked at each other. He narrowed his eyes. She wasn't lying. She had her own intentions. The thought flashed through his mind that he, in fact, was a crazy stalker who had gone crazy because of a misunderstanding. He didn't know how to react to that. There was a noise from behind the door. A cloud of dust poured out. A monster with a human body came out. He started threatening the guys. His face looked angry. Nate punched him in the face before he could say anything to them. In the end, he got a punch in the face from the monster. The girl was surprised. How did he punch the boss so easily? The guy just exhaled. He did it solo. The boss was lying on the ground. He was looking at the guys. It was clear from his face that they were in shock. Taking the girl by the shoulders, he asked her to keep it a secret that he was in the dungeon, and what he said there, to also keep it a secret. He smiled at her. She said, otherwise he would warn the whole team. The guy took the man away for a talk. Chloe was watching. She looked at her bracelet. A crowd of people stood in front of a huge tower. Chloe stood with her eyes closed. They brought her microphones and asked her to share her impressions of clearing the dungeon and asked if the clearing went smoothly again. Nate watched her. Chloe said that as a raid leader, she was glad that everything went without losses and injuries. The protagonist thought with a serious look that the abilities developed unexpectedly, and he suddenly became a hunter.